The sanctuary of Ao Dong-sun wasn't an office. It was a throne room of shadows and screens. 6 monitors glowed in the darkness, each one a window into every corner of his fortress. He sat motionless in his leather chair, a glass of whiskey untouched on the armrest, his eyes fixed on monitor 3. There she was. Ryan Ojo, the new maid. The greedy one. For 3 weeks, he'd watched her, taking extra portions from the kitchen, lingering too long near the master bedroom, disappearing into her quarters with bulging pockets. His security chief had compiled the evidence. Small valuables missing after her shifts, her nervous glances at corners where she didn't know cameras hid. Dong-sun had seen it 1,000 times. Desperation made people stupid. Poverty made them predators. She was just another bottom feeder who thought she could skim from the dragon of soul and walk away breathing. His phone sat on the desk, the contact already pulled up. Cleaning crew. 1 call, and Ryan Ojo would become a problem that never existed. But Dong-sun believed in being thorough. Before he pulled the trigger, literally and figuratively, he would watch 1 final hour of footage. Not out of mercy, out of completeness. He wanted to see exactly where she'd hidden his property so he could recover it before disposal. He clicked to last night's feed. 2:47 a.m., her quarters. Night vision mode. On the screen, Ryan entered her room, glancing over her shoulder with the paranoia of the guilty. She locked the door, knelt by her bed, reached deep into the shadows underneath. Dong-sun leaned forward, his jaw tightening. There it is, the stash. But as Ryan's hand emerged from beneath the bed, pulling out a tattered cardboard box, something in Dong-sun's chest went cold. That wasn't his gold. It started with his wife's wedding band. Dong-sun had noticed it missing from the glass case in his study 2 weeks ago. At first, he'd assumed he'd moved it himself during one of those late nights when grief and whiskey blurred together. But then the platinum cufflinks vanished from his dresser. Then the vintage Rolex his father had worn the day he built this empire from blood and silence. 3 items. 3 weeks. 1 new employee. Ryan Ojo had arrived in his household like a ghost, quiet, efficient, forgettable. His head of security had vetted her the way they vetted everyone. Background checks, financial records, social connections. She was clean. Broke, but clean. A student visa, 2 part-time jobs, and rent 3 months overdue. The perfect profile for someone who'd eventually get desperate enough to steal. Dong-sun pulled up the incident log on his tablet, scrolling through the timestamps. Every theft coincided with Ryan's shift rotations. The pattern was too clean to be coincidence. He'd built his empire on reading people. Every negotiation, every execution, every alliance came down to understanding what a person wanted badly enough to betray their principles for. Ryan wanted money. The evidence was everywhere. She took double portions of food from the kitchen, not eating it there, but wrapping it in napkins to smuggle out. She filled her water bottle from the filtered tap instead of the staff dispenser. She wore the same 2 uniforms in rotation, hand-washed in her bathroom sink. Poverty had a smell. Desperation had a rhythm, and theft had a pattern. His security chief, Kwan, had presented the case yesterday like a prosecutor at trial. She's in the master wing when she shouldn't be. She's in your study during off hours. Last Tuesday, she spent 11 minutes in your bedroom closet, alone. 11 minutes. More than enough time to pocket a watch. Dong-sun had given Kwan the green light to prepare termination. In his world, termination meant 2 things: severance from employment and severance from breathing. Thieves didn't get to walk away with his secrets, his possessions, or his trust. But something nagged at him. Maybe it was the way Ryan moved on camera, not with the swagger of a thief, but with the skittishness of prey. So he decided to watch 1 more night, just to be certain. The surveillance room hummed with the white noise of expensive technology. 12 terabytes of footage, archived and indexed. Dong-sun could pull up any moment from any room in his compound going back 6 months. He'd installed the system after his wife died, not because he didn't trust his people, but because trust itself had died with her. He rewound to 11:47 p.m. Ryan's shift had ended at 11, but she hadn't gone to her quarters. Instead, she'd lingered in the hallway outside the master bedroom, her hand hovering near the doorknob like she was gathering courage. Dong-sun's finger tapped the edge of his glass. This was it. The moment she'd slip inside and pocket something small enough to hide. But Ryan didn't open the door. She stood there for 2 minutes and 37 seconds, then walked away. He fast-forwarded. Ryan in the kitchen, wrapping leftover rice and vegetables in napkins. Her movements were quick, efficient, guilty. She glanced at the camera in the corner, the one she didn't know was there, and her shoulders tensed. 1:33 a.m. She was in the laundry room, hand-washing her uniforms in the utility sink. She scrubbed the fabric with the intensity of someone trying to erase evidence. 2:40 her quarters. Dong-sun slowed the playback to real time. This was the footage that mattered. Ryan entered her small room, barely more than a converted storage space, and locked the door behind her. She stood there in the green glow of night vision, breathing hard, like she'd just run a marathon. Then she moved to her bed and dropped to her knees. Dong-sun leaned closer to the screen. The camera angle was high, mounted in the corner near the ceiling, giving him a bird's-eye view. He watched as Ryan's arm disappeared under the bed frame, reaching deep into the shadows. Her body language screamed fear, shoulders hunched, head turning every few seconds to check the door. She was pulling something out, something she'd hidden. His hand moved to his phone, one text to Kwon and this would be over. But then Ryan sat back on her heels and Dong-sun saw what she was holding. A cardboard box, worn at the edges, taped shut with clear packing tape that had yellowed with age. Not a jewelry box, not a lockbox, not anything that belonged to him. Ryan's hands trembled as she peeled back the tape. Dong-sun paused the footage. Ryan was frozen on screen, the box open in her lap, her head bowed over whatever was inside. The camera angle didn't let him see the contents, only her reaction, the way her shoulders curved inward, protective, almost reverent. He picked up his phone and opened his messages to Kwon. Prepare disposal. Target, Ryan Ojo. Timeline, 0600 hours. His thumb hovered over the send button. 3 weeks of surveillance, 3 missing items. The math was clean, the pattern was clear. Ryan Ojo had access, opportunity, and motive. In Dong-sun's world, that was enough for a conviction and a sentence. He'd executed men on less evidence. But something about that box made him hesitate. It was too wrong. Thieves didn't kneel in the darkness cradling their stolen goods like sacred relics. They counted them, appraised them, hid them better. Dong-sun deleted the unsent message. He scrubbed backward through the footage, looking for context. When had Ryan retrieved this box? Where had it come from? He found it 3 hours earlier, at 11:52 p.m. Ryan wasn't in her quarters. She was in the East Wing, the section of the mansion Dong-sun had closed off after his wife's death. The hallway outside the master bedroom where he'd seen her hesitate earlier. But this time she wasn't hesitating. She was on her knees beside the hallway trash chute, her arm elbow deep in the opening, fishing for something in the darkness below. Dong-sun's jaw clenched. The trash chute led directly to the incinerator in the basement. Whatever went down that chute burned within hours. On screen, Ryan's face contorted with effort. She was sweating, her uniform sticking to her back as she stretched deeper into the chute. Finally, she pulled something free, a cardboard box, crumpled and stained with what looked like coffee grounds. She clutched it to her chest and ran. Dong-sun sat back in his chair, his mind recalibrating. She hadn't stolen the box. She'd rescued it. From the trash, from the incinerator. He switched to a different camera feed, the basement, earlier that same day. The timestamp read 6:47 p.m. His head of security, Kwon, was there with 2 other men hauling black garbage bags from a storage room. The room that used to be his wife's personal archive. Dong-sun watched as Kwon opened one of the bags and dumped the contents into the incinerator chute. Papers, photograph albums, clothing, personal effects, his wife's belongings. Kwon had been purging the house, erasing her, and Ryan had been stealing it back. Dong-sun returned to the 2:47 a.m. footage and pressed play. Ryan sat cross-legged on the floor of her tiny room, the rescued box open in front of her. She reached inside with the gentleness of someone handling something fragile, something holy. When her hand emerged, she was holding a dried flower, a white lily, browned at the edges, pressed flat between 2 pieces of wax paper. Dong-sun's breath caught. He knew that flower. His wife had carried a bouquet of them on their wedding day. She'd insisted on keeping one, preserving it like a museum specimen. He thought it was sentimental nonsense at the time. but he'd indulged her because that's what you did when someone loved you enough to marry into hell. Ryan held the flower up to the dim light, examining it like she was afraid it might crumble. Then she carefully set it aside and reached into the box again. This time she pulled out a letter. Handwritten. The ink was faded, but even through the grainy surveillance footage, Dong-sun could see the elegant script, his wife's handwriting. He'd recognize those loops and curves anywhere. Ryan didn't read it. She just held it, her thumb tracing the folded edges. Dong-sun's hand moved to the keyboard, zooming the camera in as far as the resolution would allow. He could see Ryan's face now, the exhaustion carved into her features, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she kept glancing at the door like she expected someone to burst in at any moment. She wasn't admiring stolen treasure. She was keeping vigil over someone else's memories. The realization hit him like a blade between the ribs. Ryan reached into the box a third time, a photograph. Even from the camera angle, Dong-sun could make out the image. His wife in the garden, laughing at something off camera, her hand shielding her eyes from the sun. He'd taken that photo 5 years ago, maybe 6. Before the disease, before the treatments that stole her piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a ghost in a hospital bed. Ryan stared at the photograph for a long time. Then she carefully placed everything back in the box. The flower, the letter, the photo, and sealed it with the yellowed tape. She slid it back under her bed, pushed it as far as it would go, and sat there in the darkness with her forehead pressed against her knees. Her shoulders shook. She was crying. Dong-sun sat frozen in his surveillance throne, watching a woman he'd sentenced to death weep over a dead woman's memories. Dong-sun rewound the footage again and again. Each time the story rewrote itself. The extra food Ryan took from the kitchen, she was eating it in her room at 3 a.m. because she worked double shifts and couldn't afford to miss a meal. The bulging pockets? Tissues, paper towels. Cleaning supplies she used to maintain the East Wing, the wing everyone else had abandoned. The 11 minutes in his bedroom closet? He pulled up that footage now, watching with new eyes. Ryan wasn't stealing. She was organizing, folding shirts that had been thrown on the floor, straightening shoes, treating his wife's side of the closet, untouched for 2 years, like a shrine instead of a tomb. She was maintaining a ghost, and Kwon had been erasing it. Dong-sun opened a new window and pulled up 3 weeks of basement footage, fast-forwarding through the mundane until he found what he was looking for. There, and there, and there again. 6 separate instances of Kwon and his crew hauling bags from the storage room to the incinerator. His wife's photography collection, her jewelry, the sentimental pieces, not the valuable ones. The vintage dresses she'd collected from estate sales. Books with her annotations in the margins. A christening gown that had belonged to her grandmother. Kwon hadn't asked permission. He'd simply decided that the past was inconvenient and needed to be sterilized. And Ryan, broke, undocumented, one wrong move from deportation, had been staging midnight rescue missions into a trashed chute. Dong-sun pulled up the current live feed from Ryan's quarters. She was asleep now, still fully clothed, curled on top of her blankets like she was afraid to get comfortable. One arm hung off the edge of the bed, her fingers just touching the floor, guarding the box beneath. He switched to a different camera. Kwon's office. His security chief was there now, reviewing schedules on his computer. The man looked relaxed, confident. Why wouldn't he be? He'd been running a quiet coup for months and his boss hadn't noticed. Dong-sun's phone buzzed. A text from Kwon. Ryan Ojo. Recommend immediate termination. Evidence is conclusive. Awaiting your authorization. The message had been sent 2 hours ago, during Dong-sun's review of the footage. Kwon was pushing. Eager. Too eager. Dong-sun typed a response. Denied. I'll handle personally. 3 dots appeared immediately. Kwon was typing, then they disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, understood. Let me know if you need support. Support, that's what Kwon called it when he made problems disappear. Dong-sun looked back at monitor 3. Ryan was still sleeping, still guarding memories that didn't belong to her, from men who'd decided the past needed to die. He'd built his empire on reading people, on knowing who to trust and who to bury. He'd been reading the wrong person. Dong-sun went deeper. He pulled up the audio archives, the feature most of his household didn't know existed. Hidden microphones in every major room, activated by motion sensors. 3 months of conversations, indexed by location and speaker. He started with Kwan's office. The first recording was from 6 weeks ago, 2 days after Ryan had been hired. Kwan's voice, calm and administrative. The new maid starts Monday. Foreign. Broke. Perfect. Another voice responded. Park, one of the senior enforcers. Perfect for what? For blame. We're cleaning house, remember? Getting rid of the old man's sentimental garbage. But if anything goes missing and he notices, we need someone to point at. Park laughed. Smart, a desperate immigrant with access. Even if she's innocent, no one will believe her. Exactly, and if she actually does steal something, even better. Either way, she's temporary. Dongsun's jaw clenched so hard he heard his teeth grind. He skipped forward. 3 weeks ago, the same office. This time, 3 voices. Kwan, Park, and Lee, his head of household operations. Lee's voice, the wedding band is gone. I checked the case this morning. Where is it? Sold. Private collector in Busan. Got 40 million won for it. Park, the boss is going to notice. Let him notice. That's the point. They'll review the footage, see the maid hovering around his study, and draw his own conclusions. We've been setting the stage for weeks. And the other items? The cufflinks went yesterday. The watch goes next week. Small things, sentimental things, the kind of items that make a man emotional instead of logical. What about the rest of the wife's stuff? Burn it, all of it. The old man's been living in a museum for 2 years. Time to move forward. Once we clear out the dead weight, physical and personnel, we can restructure the organization properly. Dead weight, that's what they called his wife's memory. Personnel, that's what they called Ryan. Dongsun opened another file. Last night's recording, basement level. Kwan again, talking to someone on the phone. The termination should happen by tomorrow morning. Once the maid is gone, we can finish the purge. The east wing, the storage room, all of it. Clean slate. A pause. No, he won't interfere. I've been feeding him evidence for 3 weeks. He thinks she's a thief. He's already decided she's guilty. Men like him don't change their minds once they've committed to a narrative. Another pause. Trust me. By tomorrow night, she'll be a problem that never existed, and we can finally run this organization the way it should be run. Dongsun stopped the playback. On the monitor, Ryan still slept, one hand trailing to the floor, protecting memories from men who wanted them dead. He looked at his phone, at Kwan's message waiting for authorization. Then he opened a new message thread. Not to Kwan. To someone else entirely. Dongsun left the surveillance room at 5:47 a.m. He didn't take his phone, didn't tell anyone where he was going. He simply walked through the dark corridors of his fortress, past the sleeping enforcers, past the cameras he knew were watching, straight to the staff quarters in the east wing. Ryan's door was the last one on the left. No nameplate, no decoration, just a number 7. He stood outside for a moment, listening. No sound from within. She was still asleep, still curled around her secrets. Dongsun knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed in the narrow hallway. Movement inside, fabric rustling, footsteps. The door opened a crack, and Ryan's face appeared in the gap, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that came from being woken by the man who owned everything, including her survival. Mr. Io. Her voice cracked on his name. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the morning bell. I'll be ready in. Open the door. She hesitated. Her hand trembled on the doorknob. Now. Ryan opened the door fully and stepped back. She was still in her uniform from yesterday, wrinkled and stained. Her hair was pulled into a hasty knot. She looked like someone who'd fallen asleep expecting to wake up in handcuffs. Dongsun stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The room was barely large enough for the narrow bed, a small dresser, and a plastic chair. Everything was obsessively clean, no personal items visible. No photographs on the walls, no evidence that anyone actually lived here. Mr. Ayo, if this is about, show me what's under your bed. The color drained from Ryan's face. I don't. Don't lie to me. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a man who'd ordered executions for less. I know what you've been doing. I know about the trash chute, the incinerator, the midnight rescue missions. Ryan's breathing became shallow. She looked at the door, calculating whether she could run. Show me, Dongsun said, or I'll get it myself. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Ryan dropped to her knees beside the bed, her movements slow and defeated. She reached underneath and pulled out the cardboard box. She set it on the floor between them like an offering, or a confession. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know I shouldn't have. I know they're not mine, but they were throwing them away. They were burning them. And I couldn't let them." Her voice broke on the last word. Dong-sun looked down at the box, at the yellowed tape, at the coffee stains and scorch marks from its near death in the incinerator. "Open it," he said. Ryan's hands shook as she peeled back the tape. Inside, carefully arranged like artifacts in a museum, the pressed wedding lily, the handwritten letter, the photograph of his wife in the garden. But there was more. Things Dong-sun hadn't seen on the surveillance footage. A silk scarf folded into a perfect square. His wife had worn it the day they'd signed the papers to buy this house. A recipe card in her handwriting. Dong-sun's favorite, kimchi jjigae. He hadn't eaten it since she died. A hospital bracelet. The last one she'd worn. A small leather journal, its pages filled with her thoughts during the final months. Entries he'd never known existed. Ryan pulled each item out with trembling reverence, laying them on the floor between them like she was presenting evidence in her own trial. "There were more," she whispered. 6 boxes. Maybe 7. I tried to save them all, but I was too late. By the time I realized what they were doing, most of it was already..." She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Dong-sun knelt beside her. Up close, he could see the burns on her forearms. Small, circular marks from reaching into the incinerator chute before the fire fully caught. She'd burned herself, saving his wife's memories. "Why?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. Ryan looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and fear. "Because nobody else was." The simplicity of it hit him like a fist to the chest. "I didn't know her," Ryan continued, her words tumbling out now, desperate. "I only saw her in the photographs. But she looked kind. And the way people talk about her when they think no one's listening, the old cook, the gardener, they loved her. And I thought someone should remember, someone should care that she existed." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I know I had no right. I know these aren't mine to keep. But they were going to burn them, Mr. Io. They were going to erase her like she was nothing." Dong-sun picked up the photograph. His wife's face smiled up at him, frozen in a moment of joy he'd almost forgotten existed. "Your security chief told me I should stop wasting time on the East Wing," Ryan said quietly. "He said the past was dead and I should focus on what matters now. But I couldn't. I just couldn't." Outside the door, footsteps, multiple pairs, heavy boots on tile. Dong-sun's head snapped up. "Mr. Ao?" Kwan's voice called from the hallway. "Sir, we need to speak with you. It's about the Maid situation." The doorknob turned. Dong-sun stood, placing himself between Ryan and the door, his hand moving to the weapon at his waist. The door opened. Kwan entered first, flanked by Park and Lee. All 3 stopped when they saw Dong-sun standing there, his body language unmistakable. "Sir," Kwan's eyes flicked to Ryan, then back to Dong-sun. "We received your message that you'd handle the situation personally. We came to assist with the removal." "The removal," Dong-sun repeated flatly. "Yes, sir. The Maid. The evidence of theft is overwhelming and..." "Show me the wedding band." Kwan blinked. "Sir? My wife's wedding band, the one that went missing 3 weeks ago. You documented it in your report. Show it to me." A pause. "Too long. We haven't recovered it yet, but once we search the Maid's, you won't find it there." Dong-sun's voice was ice. "You won't find it anywhere in this house, because it's in Busan, private collector, 40 million won. Want to tell me how a piece of evidence from an ongoing theft investigation ended up sold before the suspect was even questioned?" The color drained from Kwan's face. "The cufflinks are gone too, aren't they? And the watch?" Dong-sun stepped forward. "Tell me, Kwan, how does a thief steal items that were already sold before anyone noticed they were missing?" Park's hand moved toward his waist. Dong-sun's gun was out before Park's fingers touched metal. "I wouldn't." Dong-sun's aim didn't waver. "I've been watching all of you for 12 hours. I know about the purge, the incinerator, the restructuring, the clean slate. I have every conversation recorded, every transaction documented, every moment of your quiet little coup preserved in crystal-clear digital quality." Lee took a step back. Kwan stood frozen. "You thought I was a grieving fool," Dong-sun continued. "Too emotional to see what was happening in my own house. Too attached to the past to notice the present. You were half right. I was a fool, but not about grief, about trust. He gestured toward Ryan without taking his eyes off the three men. I was ready to kill the only loyal person in this entire fortress, the only one who cared enough about what I'd lost to risk everything protecting it. Ryan made a small sound behind him. Shock or maybe disbelief. Here's what's going to happen, Dongsun said. You three are going to walk out of this room. You're going to pack your personal items, and you're going to leave my property within the hour. If you try to take anything that doesn't belong to you, if you contact anyone in my organization, if you even think about retaliating, he paused. Well, you know what happens to thieves in my world. Kwan's jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. I made my mistake 3 weeks ago, when I listened to you instead of my own eyes. Dongsun lowered his weapon slightly. Now get out, before I change my mind about letting you leave breathing.